So I'm gonna attempt to play Yankee Doodle Dandy, or
Okay.
that's what it's called, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't heard it yet.
All right, here we go. All right, so here we go.
Welcome to Table Talk, the show about beer, board games, and everything else. I'm Rich.
And I'm Alex, and today we are going to continue our discussion on America.
America, America,
God shed His grace on me. Sing it, Elvis. And crowned thy good with brotherhood.
From
sea
to
to
shining
sea.
Very good. Very good.
Where's the bongo
Very
drums when you need them, man?
Yes, we are talking about America. This is part 3 of our American series. If you missed parts 1 and 2, don't know where you've been, but time to get with the program.
Yeah.
We're talking about America. We've been talking about it for a couple weeks now. If you missed episodes 1 and 2, go ahead and take a look in the top left corner over there. And you can see a little link that will take you back to episode 1 where we paired a little. It's up there. Just don't worry. It's there. I think over there. There. I think it's there.
It's somewhere.
If not, then it's there. But it should be there.
Yep.
Take a look. It's episode 1. We paired a great beer called Samuel Adams Summer Ale. We paired it with a game, Hold the Line, the American Revolution. So that was the beer and board game pairing. Last week, Alex and I talked about colonial life and kind of some situations that led up to a little bit of friction between those two groups, right? Not to mention other groups that are involved in that, and that we're going to talk a little bit more. Today, we're talking about some untold stories of the war. So instead of going, battle by battle chronologically, which would be kind of boring, and hopefully something that you, if you're an American, hopefully something that you learned in grade school, we're going to talk about some things that maybe you didn't learn in school, maybe some things that we can school you on as non-historians and people who have not studied this at all, except for just a little bit before starting this show. No, we're fine. We did our research, right?
Yeah.
Didn't we? Okay, good.
Yeah,
we did our research. Alex, I know I'm being a little boring. I already poured as well. I'm being boring. I'm sticking with Samuel Adams, the Boston Lager, which we already talked about in the previous episodes. But if you want to learn more about Samuel Adams, that's what I'm drinking. But I'm actually interested because I know Alex decided to be more creative than me this week and bring something else to the table. What did you bring as far as your beer pairing, Alex?
Well, I am a big fan of what is known as the Appalachian Mountain Brewery. This is in Boone, North Carolina. And I ended up seeing this on the shelf of the local Wegmans, and I couldn't help but think, you know what? I think this belongs in the show. This is Appalachian Mountain Brewery's American Lager. It was a gold medal winner for Best Lager. And
it's an American episode. It's an American series, so an American lager makes perfect sense.
It fit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Makes sense. That's the deal. So that's what I'm going to have. So I'm going to open mine.
Go for it.
Since you already did the honors.
Yep. Yeah, I'm waiting on you.
Hopefully this doesn't explode. Here we go, guys.
Yeah, hopefully not. If it does, that would be hilarious, and maybe we get some more views. Doesn't look like the case.
We'll have the 60-second. You won't believe this. It explodes.
Yeah, but that's just YouTube, though. All of our listeners are still listening on the podcast. So for all you listeners, Alex opened the can and it exploded everywhere. And now there's beer all over his room, in his spare room in his house where he records his table talk episode. No, he's fine. He just poured it and
It's perfectly
has a
fine.
nice pour now. Well, yeah. Well, here, looking forward to a good conversation moving forward here, Alex. Cheers,
Cheers
to America and the untold stories of the American Revolution.
Amen. Cheers to
Amen.
America.
Like usual with every episode, we're just going to remind you, if you are watching us on YouTube, hey,
Hello.
check out our pretty faces right there on our YouTube channel, Table Talk with Rich and Alex. Remember that you can also put us in your ears. There's a little thing called a podcast where you can actually download us and listen to us talk as well. You can't see our faces, which is kind of a drag, but you still get to listen to our nice, smooth, silky voices. So and you can just pop us right in your ears, let us nestle right inside of there, and we'll talk to you, whisper sweet little nothings about America while you listen to us.
America.
America.
America. The United States of America. Sorry, everybody.
Yep, we're sorry.
No.
And we just encourage you guys, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Comment. Let us know what you agree with, what you don't agree with, something you want to add to the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. We also want to give a nice little shout out to our sponsors. I'll go ahead and start. While I'm doing that, though, Alex had a little ditty that he wanted to play for us while we take care of this. So,
ladies and
hidden talents coming to the surface.
I don't know if this is sacrilege to play during an American celebration, but America is filled with all kinds of people from all kinds of places.
How would it be sacrilege? What are you talking about?
Because this is an Irish tin whistle, so that's
it's a flute. Okay, it's a flute.
It's an Irish. It's an Irish tin whistle.
Okay, so, it's an Irish tin whistle, but we can just pretend it's like a flute during okay. Go ahead.
So I'm gonna attempt to play Yankee Doodle Dandy, or
okay,
that's what it's called, right?
Maybe, I don't know. I haven't heard it yet.
All right, here we go. All right, so here we go.
All right. While he's playing that, we're going to go ahead and talk about Instacart, fresh groceries from the local stores you love, delivered right to your front door in as little as 1 hour. By following the link in the show notes, you can sign up for a 14-day free trial and get free delivery on your first order over $35. Choose from multiple stores in your area to get all of your grocery needs in one single order. All of your produce is hand-selected by local shoppers based on your preferences. Instacart also highlights deals in your area to help you save money. Find everything you usually buy and get some smart suggestions for new items. They pick the freshest produce and keep your eggs safe too.
Well done.
Yeah, that was very good.
I don't know if that remotely resembled the melody, but I'm also trying to play it at a somewhat less ear-piercing level that it probably would need to be.
It was fine.
Thanks.
Yeah, I liked it.
I tried.
Yeah. And then just a reminder, guys, using our link specifically lets Instacart know that we were the ones who sent you, which of course helps to support the show. And remember that you can get a free delivery on your first order over $35 just by signing up for a 14-day free trial. And you can do that right in the link down there.
Right there.
Right down there.
Right there.
Down there.
Right there.
All right.
So I'm going to go with our second, ladies and gentlemen, and while I do that, Rich is going to be doing something for us as well. This is group participation, everybody.
Yeah, well, I figured, I've been putting this off anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and tune my guitar while you're doing that. So go ahead and talk about our other our other sponsor, and I'll take care of this while you're doing it.
Okay, great. All right. Buzzsprout is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Your show can be online and listed in all the major podcast directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more within minutes of finishing your recording. Podcast isn't hard when you have the right partners, and the team at Buzzsprout is passionate about helping you succeed. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get your message out to the world. Buzzsprout, let's create something great together. So we use Buzzsprout, everybody, and if you are able, by following the link that are in the show notes, you are letting Buzzsprout know that it was us who sent you, and then you as well get a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, which of course helps support our show so you get more quality opportunities like Rich tuning his guitar in the middle of the show as well. And of course, if you want to start with some great gear and you have a quiet place, what more do you want? You want some Buzzsprout. Upgrade that plan, and Buzzsprout has tons of guides to help you find the right equipment at the right price. Buzzsprout, you should do it today.
Thank you, Alex.
Well done.
Thank you. I've been putting that off. I'm glad I got a chance to do that. Yes, Buzzsprout. Good platform if you want to start a podcast. If you want to do what we do, I mean, you can't do exactly what we do because let's face it, we're pretty darn good at it. But if you want to attempt to it, at least, you can create an account with Buzzsprout. So, all right, let's dive into it. I'm excited to hear your story. So, what we've done is Alex has found a few stories, a couple stories and a half, maybe, of untold stories of the American Revolution, and I have found a couple stories as well that I'm eager to share. I'll let Alex. I'm going to let you go first, just because I'm excited to hear what you have. You're kind of I don't know if you're comfortable with this designation, but I will say you are a history buff. To me, you seem like a history buff. So I'm always interested to hear your take on things, including our conversation. This goes all the way back to like the Wild West, our Wild West conversation. I still think about that to this day. And that was kind of like the moment where it clicked. I'm like, oh, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. I should probably do some research for these shows. So I'm excited to hear what you found.
Well, thank you. And I don't know, for anyone interested in history, I can recommend many different authors. The two authors that I really enjoyed of the little of in-depth history, excuse me, that I've come across is Hampton Sides, Blood and Thunder, which is a great book about the American West. And then essentially any book by David McCullough. I myself have not actually read all that much of his, but of the little that I have, I've found his writing both astounding and just exceptionally in depth about everyone, not just like main players, but like he'll give the quote unquote little people of history, whatever that means, their due, which I think is really cool.
He's the one who wrote 1776, right?
Correct.
Which is
Okay. And he also wrote John Adams, which is what the HBO show is based after. He also wrote Truman. Both Truman and John Adams won the Pulitzer. I think he's one of the few.
Oh wow!
I think he's one of the few authors to win like multiple Pulitzers. But again, I could be wrong.
Okay.
Anyway, quite a talent. Glad he has contributed to the American history like that.
Yeah.
So I have a few stories, and they're not necessarily in order. It's just more on what I know about the American Revolution. For one, it's actually amazing. I just want to say, and I think us Americans, we really don't fully understand the magnitude of the fact that the Americans actually won against what was then one of the most powerful forces on the planet at the time. Probably the only other force that would have been equal to that was France at the time. And perhaps Spain, but certainly France and England. So to think that we were actually able to beat them, obviously us having French help was a big boon to that effort. However, it is still pretty amazing. So it's a pretty cool thing that all these different things ended up happening, and some of the stories that I like are kind of about that. So. One of my favorites, I'll start with this, is the Battle of Brooklyn, also known as the Battle of Long Island. It has two different names. And what's interesting is that I actually when I used to live in Brooklyn, I lived next to the Gowanus Canal, which I did not realize is actually part of that battle. That it was basically like instead of a canal back then, it was like a dip in the landscape, and that was actually part of the forces when they were fighting. So there's a little bit of history even just at that point. So the Battle of Brooklyn took place on August 27th, 1776, and I'll just read this out a little bit. It was also known as the Battle of Brooklyn and the Battle of Brooklyn Heights. It was an action of the American Revolutionary War at the western edge of Long Island in the present-day Brooklyn, New York. So if you guys have ever set foot in New York City, for instance, if you go near where the Brooklyn Bridge is, it's actually one of the direct areas where in this case, Washington and his men were resoundingly defeated by General Howe and his British troops. So Washington was actually forced to flee and headed to the island of Manhattan and then eventually to the shores of New Jersey across the Hudson. A couple interesting things about this. One, I think it's interesting in that it was George Washington's resoundingly loudest loss in the war. He lost over 1,000 men, I think, estimated.
It was early too.
It was very early. Like if you think we declared independence in July, and then August 27th, that was when it happened. So the reason why, in particular, why the British wanted that area is they wanted New York City. New York City was strategically a place that was essentially in the middle of the colonies at that time, where they wanted to go after Boston. They wanted to essentially break the back of the colonies to divide them in order to separate them from both communication as well as supplies and resources, etc. So their whole mindset was, if you take New York and you're able to capture that and possess it, then you're able to essentially quit all communication. And they were successful in that regard. However, one interesting note that I don't know how often is talked about. I don't remember learning this anyway when I was a kid. But what was fascinating is that General Howe was recommended by his not inferiors, his
soldiers,
people lower than him in
junior officers, enlisted, sure.
He was
inferiors.
Inferior. Well, they say superior, right? I don't know.
Right. He was his men.
He was strongly recommended by his men to overtake and defeat Washington in a certain point. And he did not. This was, for whatever reason, of which I'm sure if I was able to dig a little deeper, I'd understand the full reason. But he essentially did not attack them full on to essentially capture them in time. So Washington was able to essentially escape with all of his men. And this is like in the thousands of men that were able to escape. So as the old saying goes, he lost the battle, but eventually you win the war. So the key is that he was like, okay, I'm going to lose for now. He went up and left, but instead of both losing the city and the Continental Army, which had he lost all his men at that time, it probably would have ended the war a lot faster and perhaps not in our favor. But he was able to essentially live and run and fight another day. So that is the Battle of Brooklyn / Battle of Long Island / Battle of Brooklyn Heights, whatever the name is.
That's interesting. So, and if you go to Brooklyn Heights, which is where Andy and I lived while we were in Brooklyn, you go down to an area right next to the Brooklyn Bridge. There's this old church down there that they were serving ice cream out of when we were there. Who knows what they're doing now? But there's actually like a little placard in the ground next to that dock area, next to the piers, where it kind of documents the retreat of the colonials, of the colonial army. But yeah, so I actually, do you mind if I share a quick thing of mine real quick? Because it has to do with a little thing that happened on August 27th called the Battle of Brooklyn Heights, which is exactly what you're talking. But interestingly enough, you hit a different aspect of it. I focused on one thing in particular about that battle that I want to add. And this kind of plays into kind of what I've been talking about in the past couple episodes, why I'm so interested in especially the mindset of the British officers during the war. And that's a good example, I feel like, early on, is there was this, there's this respect almost right off the bat that kind of cripples the British Army, right? Because the Continental Army is furious. They're enraged, and they're rebel. I mean, they have kind of this rebel mindset, right? And I believe early on you had like this kind of gentlemanly type of mindset on the British side, as far as like, we're going to fight a gentleman's war, right? And you had the colonists who really would stop at nothing to get these people out of their home, right? So I feel like the war was lost right there, and to some degree, and it's kind of shown with what you were talking about, this kind of respect for George Washington, George Washington Esquire, which will play into my story a little bit. I'll explain that. But just kind of respect out of them, and not like just pouncing on them and terminating them completely, kind of when they had a chance to. So my part of the story focuses on part of it focuses on Washington's retreat, but it also focused on the events leading up to that battle. So with Howe, who was a superior British force, having recently landed at Long Island, they handed the Continentals a humiliating defeat at the Battle of Brooklyn Heights, just like you said. That happened on August 27th. So Washington gave 3 reasons for his decision to retreat. He needed to reunite his forces, extreme fatigue, and the lack of proper shelter from the weather. So, for his part, Howe had attempted to reconcile with the Patriots before blood was spilled, but had been rejected by Washington because he had failed to use Washington's title of general in addressing the letter. So I remember hearing this story, so this is why I dug it up. It just happens to be circumstance that we're talking about the same thing, and I'm just kind of focusing in on these letters. So there's 2 of them that General Howe sent to George Washington prior to this battle, right? And I'm going to read you some of those. I'm going to read you the first letter at least, so you can kind of get a feel for the language being used here. But this is interesting. So basically the gist of this story is 2 letters were being sent by General Howe to George Washington Esquire, not General George Washington. And both letters were denied and never read by George Washington because they weren't addressed properly. I think that's hilarious. All right, so this is a letter from Lord Howe to George Washington Esquire, written on July 13th and attempted to be delivered on July 14th. Howe wrote this and tried to deliver it from the Eagle, which was one of the ships just off the shore of Staten Island. All right. The letter begins, Sir, the situation in which you are placed and the acknowledged We'll start again.
I hope he wrote that.
Yeah. He died in the castle.
Why would he die while bothering writing about?
You wouldn't just cough. Oh, you just say it. All right. The situation in which you are placed and the acknowledged liberality of your sentiments induce me very much to wish for an opportunity to converse with you on the subject of commission with which I have the honor to be charged. What?
What does that mean?
What? Just being a kind fellow at this point, just saying, hey, what's up? As I trust that a dispassionate consideration of the king's benevolent intentions may be the means for preventing the further effusion of blood and become productive of peace and lasting union between Great Britain and America. If this proposal should be acceptable, I would advance in a frigate to have the pleasure to receive you as near to the town of New York as will be most for your accommodation. I flatter myself I shall find no difficulty in obtaining credit to my assurances for the perfect safety of your person and free liberty to return on your shore as at your pleasure. Though I shall be equally ready to afford any more preferable security that may be required, in case no other objection occurs to the desired interview. I am, sir, yours sincerely, blah, 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 blah. What that means, because it's complete gibberish to me, basically means, hey, let's talk about this. Let's have a conversation, right? You and me, let's sit down before any effusion of blood happens, right?
I like that.
So he wrote this and had it delivered. So there's 2 different perspectives of this that I want to share. So one happens on the American side, and this comes from Samuel Blatchley Webb, who was a commanding officer on the of the 9th Connecticut Regiment. So he wrote, a flag of truce from the fleet appeared, on which Colonel Joseph Reed and myself went down to meet it, about halfway between Governor's and Staten Island. Lieutenant Philip Brown of the Eagle offered a letter from Lord Howe directed George Washington Esquire, which, on account of its direction, we refused to receive and parted with the usual compliments. So that's the American version of what happened. Hey, a ship came over. They gave us a letter that was titled to George Washington Esquire, and we refused it. Have a nice day. That's their version. Then you have the version from Ambrose Searle, who was an officer of the Royal Navy on the Eagle, all right? He was aboard the Eagle on the 4th of July. He wrote in his journal that Lieutenant Brown was dispatched with a flag of truce to Washington at New York. He was stopped by 3 boats at a little distance from the town demanding his business. Upon being told that he had a letter from Lord Howe to their commander, they ordered him to lay to, while one of the boats went to shore for directions. In a short time, 3 officers came off and desired to know to whom the letter was addressed. They would not touch it, but begged the lieutenant to read it, as the address was to George Washington, Esquire. They said there was no such person among them, and therefore would not receive it. Upon being asked what address they required, it was answered that all the world knew who General Washington was since the transactions of last summer, which I'm assuming refers to like Breeds Hill or something that happened on June 17th. So that person doesn't exist. I just think that's hilarious. Just the cockiness, the arrogance of Americans, even back then. And it wasn't even. And who knows if General George Washington or George Washington Esquire, whichever one you prefer, who knows if he actually like gave these officers like this direction, like, hey, I would assume maybe, right, that he would say, hey, if it's not addressed to General Washington, I don't want it, right? So these 3 officers, and as a lieutenant myself, just imagining like working for a general and like just like going out on his behalf and just being like, who's it addressed to? George Washington Esquire? I don't know who that is. Sorry.
Though, if I may provide a thought about that, though, if you're going up, I mean, here's the thing, and this is the thing where I've never been in the military, but of the little that I understand, rank is extremely important to recognize, right?
Yeah.
So if you're America and you are a fledgling nation and you're trying to essentially like put up a fight or stand or whatever, basically have your call a place your own, and if the opposing force is like, I mean, that it was intentional that the person wrote Esquire, not General, because Esquire and General are 2 completely different things. So I get why, because if they had to deliver the letter to George Washington, can you imagine what the response would have been had it been George Washington Esquire? I mean, that's like basically like it's George Washington the kid, good.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah, and as a lieutenant, that is a good point. As a lieutenant, you always have in the back of your head, what is going to be the reaction of my commander to me?
Right.
So if I receive a letter on his behalf that has some type of insult in it, that which includes not addressing the general by his title. If I'm going to accept it on his behalf and then I bring it to him, the wrath that's going to pour down on me from my commander, having accepted it, right? So that I'm sure that's what was going through their head at that point. It's just funny that that's the guidance that they were working off of. That's how like entrenched they were in their beliefs that, if you're not going to address me by my title, which I am, I'm a general. Like I'm a general. I'm not a general of the British Army. I am a general of the Continental Army of America. So.
I think there's also an interesting thing to point, though, is that the British know who Washington is. Like he's not just some random dude. Like he fought with the British during the French and Indian War. So like there's some clear distinctions that, like, again, they know what they're doing. Like it's definitely like a
right. And just to prove that it wasn't just a one-time mistake, like, oops, sorry, my bad. They attempted another letter, General Howe did, 2 days later, on the 16th of July, in which he made the same exact error, and which also did not make its way to George Washington. So in that case, there are, and again, I liked looking up 2 different sides of it just to make sure we have 2 different viewpoints of it.
Right.
So these letters are documented. I'm getting them from somewhere. So the British headquarters papers, also known as the Carleton Papers, contain records kept by commanders-in-chief of the British Army in North America during the American Revolution. So they have copies of this. So the original British headquarters papers are preserved at the National Archives in England. So those papers actually say both of the copies in the Carleton Papers are addressed to General Washington. All right. But then you have the colonial office papers, which are stored at the National Archive, say that it was George Washington Esquire. So we have two kind of competing, and who knows if these are the exact letters, maybe the date's missing on some of them, I'm not sure. But we do have kind of some competing information here, and possibly a little bit of propaganda maybe by the Americans to just further
or the British. I mean,
7 letters. It's 7 letters. General. Just put, and you can even abbreviate it to GEN period. Just like you can abbreviate Esquire. Actually, it can be argued Esquire is a longer word than general.
And probably more difficult.
And probably more difficult to pronounce sometimes. Esquire. And who knows how to pronounce it? Esquire.
No one knows. No one knows.
General. Just say general. It's a lot easier.
General GW.
Yeah. So anyway, cool that we both thought about Brooklyn Heights.
No, that's fun.
Or Long Island, the Battle of Long Island, whatever you want to call it. What was your other story?
So my other story is one of my favorite stories about how it explains the fact that the United States is such a different type of country. When people were thinking about what the United States was back in those days, your framework of what you think that a nation is based on is based largely, at least in the Western civilization, whatever that means. You're basing it off of England, France, Spain, Netherlands, Italy, any number of these places, right?
Yeah.
And largely the strategy was in war is that if you took over the capital city, you essentially take over the country, right? If you defeat Paris, you win France. If you defeat London, you win England, etc. Madrid or Barcelona for Spain. So the British occupation of Philadelphia, September 26th, 1777. So the British Army marches into Philadelphia and takes over and begins an occupation that essentially lasted until the following spring. All right.
Okay.
So what I love about this story is that essentially the British walk in. Philadelphia is in essence kind of the cultural hub of the 13 colonies. Boston being the rebellious one, but Philadelphia was kind of the sophisticated. This is the place. Like Virginia might have been the most powerful colony at the time. Both wealth and people coming out of it, the mines and education. However, Philadelphia was still like top notch and the top dog for that kind of thing.
Seems like a lot of the thinking happened in Philadelphia. A lot of the kind of document focused thinking and actions happened in Philadelphia.
Yeah. And largely it was the capital originally for a time before it was eventually moved to DC. I think it was next. I forget. New York was there for a spell, but not for long. And what was interesting to me, though, is the fact that the British invade, right? Well, the Americans just up and leave. Like, they're just like, okay, all right, we move. This is how we go. And then the Continental Army went up the Valley Forge. Obviously, they had to deal with a lot of stuff where they were highly uncomfortable. It was cold. There was, disease and that kind of thing. But they were also able to kind of go away, train, kind of get battle hardened, and then be able to come back for action the following year. But the funny thing was to me is that it really showed, I think, a great example of the weird differences when your country is made of states, not made of just one country. So that you're sure, like you may lose a city, but again, you're able to kind of just up and leave and be like, okay, we're just going to wait it out. It's not a big deal. We lost Philly. All right, we'll bide our time. So that's one of my favorite kind of just stories that I often don't realize, mainly just because you tend to forget that like the Americans lost battles. Like they lost a lot.
Oh yeah, especially early on.
Yeah, until the French got involved, like it was really not that hopeful for the Americans. I think though, and just knowing that like the British won, many of these battles, I think is important to know because obviously you had to know what was at stake. But yeah, I just love the fact that like the Americans just kind of up and left, like their jewel city of at the time. They're just kind of like, okay, you take it, you win for now, and they just left. So that one is personally one of my favorites, just in terms of strategy. It's also I don't know. I think it's a point of wisdom to know what our ancestors did, and knowing when to up and leave and lose
Yeah.
and accept the loss, but then be able to move on and learn from it. So
Yeah, and regroup and figure something out. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, a good point in all of that is that the colonies were doing something, or at least envisioning something that, I mean, for the most part, hadn't really been done yet, right? Like we're kind of thinking of they were kind of thinking along the lines of like we're each individual governments and individual states in a way, and they probably weren't using the term states at that point, but like they each wanted to govern themselves. They had no interest, at least not collectively, to be like a nation all in one, right? They didn't want like a central government at that point, right? They wanted individual governments. They wanted to kind of run themselves, but they wanted to do it as partners with each other, right? That was kind of the concept of thinking of we are entering or want to enter, and this is kind of Articles of Confederation type of thinking, right? We are entering this agreement to help each other, right? But we don't want to, be locked into like this like central government that all of us have to kind of be looped into.
What's
So yeah,
interesting is that the United States was always wanting to not be beholden to a centralized figure of government, like
right,
a king
yeah,
or a queen. All right, so I'll read this real quick. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. So they, from the get-go, were focused on the state part, which I think is a really important. Well, I mean, and I think it's an important point to make, in that
it is.
The strength in the country is that it's all from these different places that have their own individual autonomy, which is something it continues to fascinate me, because like there are systems of government within our own, Congress and House of Representatives, or sorry, Congress being the Senate and House of Representatives, in which even how the power between states is diffused and different based on those two different ways, and one is by population, and then the other get 2 senators per state. So it's an interesting thing how even the power it's meant to be balanced regardless of size or influence or whatever it is.
Right.
So I don't know. It's a fascinating thing. Whether or not it always works, but it's really cool.
But I think that plays into that story though. Take Philadelphia. Like when you cut a pie, right? Like it's like, take a piece of pie. There's more pie. like it's not like you just took all the pie from us. Like we have other pieces of pie we can go get, right? Not sure why pie entered my head first.
Yeah, it's America.
America
right?
pie,
apple
American
pie. Here we go, guys. The smell of apple pie wafting through the window. It breezes around.
Did you say wafting?
Wafting.
Wafting.
Yeah. But now I can guarantee you guys, now you're thinking about apple pie, and now you want it. So have fun, bake that, and let us know if you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Send us some in the mail. Actually, I'm not going to give you my address, so don't.
Yeah. No, that's all right. Do you have another story? Because I have.
Yeah, I got. Okay, you got one more?
Well, I have one in particular, and then one like mini story.
Okay.
But
all right. Here, let me go real quick.
You go
before you
go. Yeah.
All right. So and this kind of plays into what you were talking about before with the French being involved. So we know the French got involved, right? We couldn't have won the war without a navy, and we didn't have a navy, and the French did, and they came over and helped us out. I learned this at some point, but completely forgot about it. Had no idea that the Spanish were involved in the American Revolution, to the degree that they were. I threw that little tidbit out the window when I learned about the American Revolution. I just didn't think about the Spanish being involved. Makes sense because the Spanish got territory in America from as a result of the Treaty of Paris, which, by the way, there's like 100 treaties of Paris. Anyway, we'll talk about that next week. Treaty of Paris 1783, Spanish got territory. So the Spanish were basically the ones that, I didn't realize this, they were basically operating in the South, kind of around East Florida, the Bahamas, Cuba, and they're actually what prevented the Royal Navy from basically looping into the Gulf and coming up the Mississippi River and basically outflanking the colonies. The Spanish Armada basically was what was preventing them from doing that. I didn't know that at all. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that being a strategy, right? So I started kind of looking into the British, and then I started looking into like different battles and what type of battles that the Spanish were involved with. And I found information on the last battle of the American Revolution, which was so interesting to me that the last battle of the American Revolution did not involve the American colonies at all. It did not involve America. So it was funny because this is right around the time. So this is 1783, basically. Treaty of Paris is being signed. America is now officially a thing, right? And America didn't even fight in the last battle of its own war. The battle was between Great Britain and the Spanish, and it was over the Bahamas. And that was the last battle of the war. So I looked into it a little bit because I thought it was funny. And it's kind of a pointless battle too. It was like not a lot happened. It was just like just kind of like a little. It's like when you turn off the faucet, right? When you turn off the faucet, you had a whole bunch of water that was just gushing out, right? That was the American Revolution. And then you turn it off and you get this like little drip right at the end of it. And that's pretty much what the last battle of the American Revolution was. It's just like a little, and it was one of those ones that just kind of like hangs on there for a little bit. And you're watching it and you're like, it's not going to fall. It's just going to stay there forever.
How you describe it reminds me of like two kids that are fighting each other as kids. Yeah, and then the parents like stop it, and they put them as separate, and then the parent like turns by just ever so slightly, and the kid like slaps the other kid in the face.
It's exactly like that, except picture a third kid coming out of the middle of nowhere and just smacking the other kid across the face. Had nothing to do with the original fight.
Jimmy, why are you here?
It's just like he's like, I've been watching from a distance, and I side with you. Anyway, so it was kind of a pointless. So Spain it's not necessarily like that at all. Spain played an important part in the American Revolution, so they weren't just innocent bystanders. So Spain declared war on Britain as an ally of France, itself an ally of the American colonies. So most notably, Spanish forces attacked British positions in the south and captured West Florida from Britain, and the siege of Pensacola. This secured the southern route for supplies and closed off the possibility of British offensives through the western frontier of the United States via the Mississippi River. Spain also provided money, supplies, and munitions to the American forces. So beginning in 1776, it jointly funded Rodrigue Hortales and Company, a trading company that provided critical military supplies. Spain provided financing for the final siege of Yorktown in 1781 with a collection of gold and silver in Havana, then Spanish and Cuba.
Wow.
Spain was allied with France through the Bourbon Family Compact. No idea what that is. Feel free to look it up. And the revolution was an opportunity to confront their common enemy, Great Britain. And as the newly appointed chief minister of King Charles III of Spain, the Count of Floridablanca wrote in March 1777, "The fate of the colonies interests us very much, and we shall do for them everything that circumstances permit." So the capture of the Bahamas, which is the final battle of the American Revolution, took place in April 1783, and this is around the same time Treaty of Paris is being signed, so America is officially America.
Wow.
Right? No longer under British rule. So late in the American Revolutionary War, when a Loyalist expedition under the command of Andrew Deveau, and that's spelled Deveaux, so Loyalist, but kind of a French name. Interesting. Set out to retake the Bahamas from the Spanish. So the expedition was successful, and Nassau, that's Nassau, which is a city, fell without a shot being fired. As one of the last actions of the entire war. The Bahamas had been taken by Spanish forces in May of 1782, just a year before. So
the British won.
Yes, so the British won the last battle of the American Revolution, not against America, but against Spain.
That's crazy, man.
Isn't that weird?
Bahamas are right there.
Yeah.
Right there, guys. Oh,
yeah, right down there.
Yeah.
So over 600 Spaniards surrendered, and 50 cannon and 7 ships were captured. Some of the ships had been scuttled, which I'm not sure what that means. They were later refloated, and the Spaniards were repatriated to Cuba. So by this time, Britain had already given up East Florida in exchange for the Bahamas.
Wait, so they used to have East Florida, and then they gave it up for the Bahamas, even though they fought a battle for the Bahamas.
Yeah, but this guy went rogue. He was a loyalist. He was a loyalist from the colonies. So here's the story. So Major DeVoe departed from St. Augustine with 70 followers and was joined at sea by 2 days later by the 26-gun privateer brigantine called Perseverance. That's the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Basically pirates, right? Pirates. So privateer, if you don't know what a privateer is basically a pirates that have been commissioned by the government to do something. Mercenaries.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was a 16-gun, 120-man brigantine, Whitby Warrior of Daniel Wheeler. That's another ship that joined the expedition. And they anchored off the harbor of Eleuthera on 6 April, recruiting another 170 volunteers for an attempt against the Spanish garrison at New Providence. The whole time they're doing this, British officials are basically doing what they're doing, just in a more official way, and just saying, "Hey, can we have the Bahamas? We'll give you East Florida." and Spanish officials are saying, "Yeah, let's do it."
Bien.
Yeah. And so the whole time they're doing this, like, it's already being done. Like, there's no point to this at all.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
That must have happened.
Luckily, it all happened with no shots fired, though. So nobody died pointlessly.
Yeah, no one got killed for it. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must have happened so frequently, though, in an era before the telegram, in particular, when information took a long time to transfer from one thing to the next, especially across the ocean. I mean, can you imagine the king giving orders to the? I mean, that's probably one of the disadvantages that the British had about strategy. Is it the king? I'm sure had to do like, all right, General, Mr. Howe, we want to talk this through, and I'm going to give you a year planner. Here you go. Here's your agenda for the year. And I'm gonna. It's a choose your own adventure. If this one doesn't work, then you have to choose option B. And here's all of the option B plans. Yeah,
tiers of how it could.
It's all the yarn and everything leading to the different thing. And George Washington's face is right in the middle. It's really expensive because you can only paint their faces. There's no such thing as photos.
Yeah, they commissioned an artist
to create conspiracy theory painting. But I just can't imagine like the amount of delay you have in war during that time. It must have just been so mind-numbing sometimes. But then again, no one knew any different, so maybe no one cared, and it was just a kind of a, you just deal with it. But yeah, so interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the last battle of the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
Yeah, and it wasn't even fought by any Americans. It was between the British and the Spanish over territory that already belonged to the British in the first place.
I can't wait to go to the Bahamas now. I've yet to go, and now I'll look for that piece of history. Oh, the last battle. Where was the last battle?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, my last story actually has to do with my family, believe it or not.
Oh, cool.
So we have, and years ago when I was a kid, and we were, I guess, doing Revolutionary War as part of school history class in, I guess, middle school. At the time, I did a little digging with my parents, and my parents helped me out in the initial scoping this out. But there's a battle in North Carolina called the Battle of, in South Carolina, it's Battle of Kings Mountain.
Okay.
Which is in North Carolina, but they had a detachment of Loyalists that were coming in from South Carolina. So my mistake. Battle of Kings Mountain is in North Carolina, and it actually involved cousins in my family. Obviously not directly, but like way down the line. But they were cousins that were fighting on the opposite sides. So to which the story goes is that they did not meet in battle, as far as I understand. But I thought it was always very interesting to me. One, the Americans did win. I'm actually telling an American victory story, so good for them. They won.
Eagle.
Yep. Cannon fire. And Dave Martinez yelling at a Nationals baseball game. See if we can find that. But but it ended up them being
scavenger hunt for me moving.
But but they were able to win win that particular part, and
Good.
it was a defeat for the British campaign in the southern colonies. But it was always an interesting thing to actually have family, at least on my mom's side, because on my mom's side they've been around much longer in the North American region than my dad's side.
Okay.
But I don't know. That was a little kind of, it's fairly unknown unless
How did you find it? Like, how do you know? Like, was it like an ancestry.com thing, or is it just documented family history?
It's, well, as far as I understand, I can't remember who found it first, whether my grandparents knew originally and then passed the knowledge on to my parents. My
Okay.
dad is pretty big into ancestry.com,
Okay.
so I would not be surprised if some of the original kind of thing ended up happening from there.
Okay.
Because it's in near Kings Mountain, and I forget what county it is. In particular, both the church records there and the county, hall, kind of
Okay.
records. They have records of those that fought during the war, and in particular, it's just labeled by name. I believe it was the Howells, were the cousins' last name
Okay.
at the time. So
Cool.
yeah, but it was interesting because you always hear it's weird when you realize that distant family got involved. It adds a different vibe to the way a war feels.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Distant family. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we do think of it as the British against. When you think American Revolution, you think British against American colonies, but then you bring it out a little bit, right? And we obviously already know, just based off this conversation, the French got involved, and apparently the Spanish got involved too. And then, not to mention that, but zoom back in a little bit, and you have Loyalists, and Loyalists are a huge part of the war, right?
Mm-hmm.
Loyalists were basically American colonists that did not support the Revolutionary War effort.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of our ancestors probably even some of my ancestors might have sided that way.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those Loyalists too, from what I understand, especially in the North, they went to Canada.
Yeah. Yep. And we'll talk about effects of the war and everything like that on the next episode. But yeah, we're going to Canada. I don't remember what the number was. I think I looked it up, but yeah, there's a fairly decent amount of American colonists that didn't sympathize necessarily with the revolutionary plight.
Yep.
So very interesting to hear more about that, and cool that you know that. Cool that somebody in your family looked that up. I'm sure I probably had some ancestors there too. Maybe our ancestors fought side by side, Alex.
I would not be surprised. And they probably had this moment where they're like, I feel the echoes of our descendants. Yeah. It seems like there's things over my ears that are people talking at me. I don't know what it is.
Maybe our great grandsons will have a podcast together where they talk about weird things.
Like us.
Including what we're doing right now. And did you have anything else, Alex? I know you had. I know you prepared a lot. Anything else that you had lined up?
A little fun fact: the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence was Mr.
Ben Franklin.
No, it was Charles Carroll, who represented Maryland at the Continental Congress. He was born in September 19th, 1737, and he died on November 14th, 1832. That man was super old. Yeah.
Wait, what were the dates again? 1737 to 1842?
1832. The man was 95 when he said farewell to this earth. Yeah. That is a fellow who's been around a long time.
He so he saw the beginnings, kind of the makings of the Civil War.
A little bit.
Almost.
Yeah.
Saw it coming, at least, before he closed his eyes internally. Wow. Yikes.
Yeah.
That's so he was about 40 or so when the Declaration of Independence was signed?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yep.
3, 4, 5, 6, about 40.
Yep.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
I do know the youngest person to sign the Constitution was 26 years old. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh.
It's like, Interesting.
Well, if there's one thing to be said, is that it took all people from all colonies of all ages to make the country work, which is pretty cool to see.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yep. From Maine down to Georgia.
Not Florida, because that
Florida.
That was still owned by the Spanish.
They were still speaking Spanish down there, but yes, Maine down to Georgia. Those 13 colonies, they did something pretty spectacular, including calling George Washington by his correct title, and not participating in the last battle of the war itself.
Yeah.
And much more. Well, that was fun. I learned something. I feel like
I learned something too.
Did you? Good.
Yeah.
What'd you learn? Quiz time. Go.
Oh. Well, I certainly learned about the Bahamas. The fact that the last war was fought.
You didn't know the Bahamas existed?
No. Well, yes, yes. Didn't you ever hear the Bermuda Triangle? Because that clearly is the Bahamas.
Okay. Yeah,
it's not really, but
maybe that's why the triangle exists, because you had the Great Britain, France,
Spain. It just all happened.
Well, it was 4, but anyway, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. That was a new thing I learned. How about you? Quiz time. What about you?
I learned that you have ancestors.
Well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
We do appreciate you guys watching and listening, and we hope you tune in for some more. We're going to be back next week talking about the effects of the war and kind of the aftermath of what happened. So please tune in for that. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. Please subscribe, guys. We want to know that people are out there that like what we're doing. It helps us keep the show moving forward. I will say a big thank you to Instacart for being a great sponsor for us. Please download the app. Start that free trial right now. Just remember that you get a free order for your first order over $35. And then we also have Buzzsprout, which Alex will kindly talk to you about.
Oh yeah, and guys, again, we are thankful very much for Buzzsprout being one of our sponsors. It gets you as well a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, which of course does help support our show, which we appreciate. So
links down there, guys. Links down there.
Down there.
Go down there.
Yep, check it out.
They're right. I can see them. They're like right there.
Right over there.
Can you see them? I see them. They're right there.
I think we should end this by cueing colonial drums.
Okay.
The flutes.
Saluting the right thing to do with colonial. I feel like I should be marching.
Maybe.
Or I don't know. Crouching.
Well, at the very least we can finish the beer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Well, so we'll be talking to you guys next week, guys. But until then,
be happy,
brew hoppy, and
game on.
Cheers.
Cheers.
The old trope that the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth because they ran out of beer is quite true. That's the first thing that popped up.
Wait, what?